The encrypted message pulsed on my phone screen, a stark white against the velvet black of my Audi's interior. Basilique Notre Dame, 14:00H. You deserve the truth. Anonymous. My gloved hands tightened on the leather steering wheel, the Montreal skyline a frigid diorama through the sleet-lashed windshield. I'm Isabelle Moreau, and I was currently parked across from the historic basilica, feeling less like a wronged wife and more like a character in a low-budget espionage film, questioning the very fabric of my sanity. My husband, Julian Vance, was supposedly at a mergers and acquisitions summit in Zurich. His itinerary stated it. His executive assistant, a woman of terrifying efficiency, had confirmed it. The five-star hotel booking was impeccable. Yet, here I was in old Montreal, drawn by a digital phantom, promising enlightenment or perhaps ruin. I couldn't yet discern which. This is certifiably mad, I murmured, but the dark Chanel sunglasses were already sliding onto my face. The ancient bells of Notre Dame began their sonorous chime as I emerged, my Louboutin heels echoing sharply on the frozen cobblestones. Each step felt like a pilgrimage to my own undoing. I slipped through a less frequented side entrance, seeking refuge behind a colossal marble archangel. The familiar, cloying scent of aged incense and hothouse gardenias assaulted me, a perverse echo of my own wedding day, 8 years past. Same sacred space, vastly different illusions. The grand organ swelled, and my breath hitched because there he was, Julian, my Julian, standing at the high altar in a bespoke Armani tuxedo I'd never laid eyes on, hands clasped, that subtle clench in his jaw his only tell of nerves. Not in Zurich. Here. Poised. Then, the bride materialized at the grand doors, and the stone floor seemed to tilt. A cascade of raven hair, porcelain skin, a regal bearing I'd recognize her silhouette in a blizzard. Chloe Durand. My confidant since our days at McGill, the woman who'd held my hand while I chose my own wedding gown. Chers frères et sœurs. The priest's French intonations blurred into an indistinguishable drone as I watched them, my husband and my dearest friend, exchange sacred vows, promising fidelity until death parted them. Just as he had pledged to me. Just as the three of us, in our naive youth, had sworn to each other. No deceptions, no betrayals, an unbreakable trinity of friendship. I have no recollection of exiting the basilica, nor of the drive back to our Westmount townhouse. But the moment of clarity, when it struck, was crystalline. I was in our kitchen, our meticulously designed, Architectural Digest featured kitchen that Julian had overseen the renovation of the previous spring, watching the weak winter sun bleed out behind windows that now felt like the bars of a gilded cage. My phone vibrated. Julian, summit running over. Don't wait up, mon amour. I poured myself a generous measure of his prized Lagavulin, the 25-year-old he reserved for monumental occasions. The peat smoke burned my throat, a welcome, tangible pain in a life suddenly rendered counterfeit. Another ping from the anonymous sender. Now you understand. Your move, Isabelle. My move? A laugh, brittle and sharp as shattering ice, escaped me. It sounded alien, dangerous. I opened my laptop, fingers flying. Dearest Vivian, I do hope this finds you well. I've been giving serious thought to organizing that charity gala for the Children's Hospital Foundation you've always championed. Because betrayal, I was learning, wasn't merely the act itself. It was the intricate ballet of deceit that preceded it, the meticulously crafted alibis, the well-rehearsed smiles, the casual endearments that were utterly devoid of meaning. And Julian, my charming, impeccable Julian, had always been a consummate performer. But then, so had I. I took another searing sip of whiskey and allowed myself a small, cold smile. Let them enjoy their honeymoon. Let them believe they'd orchestrated the perfect coup. I had time, and I possessed something far more potent than their stolen love. I had their complete, unadulterated trust. The sun finally surrendered, plunging the room into shadow, but for the first time that day, my vision was perfectly clear. The antique Cartier photo album felt leaden in my lap, each vellum page freighted with memories now tainted, untrustworthy. There we were, Julian, Chloe, and I at 19, sprawled on the lawns of Mont Royal during a fleeting Montreal summer. Julian's arm was draped around both our shoulders, our faces alight with laughter at some long-forgotten jest. The silver-gilt edges of the photograph were tarnished, much like everything else from that ephemeral season. Ordered poutine from La Banquise, Julian called from the foyer. His footsteps, usually a comforting rhythm, now scraped against my nerves. He'd been back 3 days from the wedding, his second wedding, behaving as if the earth hadn't fractured beneath our feet, as if he hadn't just demolished the entire edifice of our shared life. I snapped the album shut as he entered our master suite, balancing 2 steaming cartons of food I wouldn't touch. Remember our Friday night ritual with Chloe? Poutine and bad movies? The words, laced with acid, were out before I could censor them. Julian's smile didn't quite ignite his eyes. That feels like a different era, Izzy. Does it? I rose, letting the heavy album crash to the Persian rug with a deeply satisfying thud. Because I saw her 3 days ago. She looked remarkably unchanged. His fork, laden with fries and cheese curds, paused infinitesimally mid-air, a flicker, so brief one might miss it, but I saw it. I saw everything now. Isabel? He placed his carton down, adopting the solicitous expression he reserved for particularly recalcitrant investors. Have you been indulging a little too much? I laughed, a hollow echo of my mother's laugh after my father's departure. Is that your strategy, Julian? Imply your wife is unhinged. I'm concerned about you. His hand reached for mine. I recoiled. When did it begin? The question scorched my throat. Before our vows? During? Tell me, Julian, was I the contingency plan or merely the elaborate cover? You're not making a lick of sense. But his left thumb twitched against his forefinger, his tell, the involuntary sign of a lie. I'd spent 8 years meticulously cataloging his mannerisms, learning the cadence of his deceptions. It's astonishing how sharply defined the cracks become when you're actively seeking them. I was at Notre Dame on Tuesday. The words hung between us, acrid as smoke. Stunning tuxedo, by the way. Far superior to the one you wore for our nuptials. The mask slipped, just for a breath, but it was sufficient. His eyes turned glacial, appraising. This was the authentic Julian, the one I'd steadfastly refused to acknowledge. It's not what it appears. Don't. My voice was devoid of tremor. I was proud of that. Don't insult my intelligence with platitudes. I witnessed you marry my best friend while I was, ostensibly, your devoted wife. What, precisely, should I surmise? He raked his hands through his perfectly styled hair. Another tell. It's intricate. There are elements you don't comprehend. Such as? The joint investment accounts you established? The Laurentian chalet you acquired under a shell corporation? Or perhaps the rather salient fact that your mother, Vivian, was privy to the entire charade. That arrested him. How did you? I'm not the naive fool you evidently perceive me to be. I moved to the antique escritoire, retrieving the meticulously compiled dossier I'd assembled over the past 72 hours. You really should employ more robust passwords than our anniversary date. Though, I suppose that holds little significance now. Isabel, please. He lunged for the documents. I held them just out of reach. We can resolve this. I can explain everything. As you explained your business summit in Zurich? I spread the papers across the sleigh bed, bank statements, property deeds, encrypted emails. Or shall we delve into the trust fund Vivian established for your anticipated progeny with Chloe? A rather generous $5 million, I noted. His face blanched. You had no right. I had every right. The scream ripped from my throat, raw and primal. I am your wife. I was your friend. We grew up intertwined, the three of us and you. I stopped, breathless. He was staring at me as if seeing me for the first time. Perhaps he was. Perhaps I'd never truly seen myself. Leave. My voice was now steady, absolute. This is my home as well. Not any longer. I held up a final document, a comprehensive power of attorney, signed the previous year when he was far too inundated to manage our estate planning. You should always scrutinize what you sign, Julian. Now, vacate the premises before I contact Marcus and have him formally escort you out. He departed, not from fear, but from the chilling recognition that this was merely the overture. He knew me well enough for that. I retrieved the photo album from the floor, tracing our younger, unblemished faces with a fingertip. We looked so blissful, so untainted. Such consummate liars, every one of us. The small Outremont cafe where Chloe and I once exchanged adolescent secrets felt diminished, claustrophobic. Perhaps it was the gravity of my impending actions, or maybe everything from my past was contracting, rendered less significant with each freshly unearthed betrayal. Chloe slid into the Eames chair opposite me, her new wedding band a twin to the one on my own finger gleaming. The sight turned my artisanal coffee to bile. I wasn't sure you'd show, she said, her fingers anxiously tracing the rim of her untouched matcha latte. Amusing. I wasn't sure you'd have the audacity to marry my husband. The words emerged softer than intended, which, paradoxically, made them cut deeper. She flinched. Isabel, about the trust fund Vivian mentioned. I pulled out the bank statements, fanning them across the polished birchwood table like cards in a high-stakes, rigged game. The 5 million CD1 Vivian Vance established for your future children with Julian. Her face drained of color not from guilt, I noted with interest, but from a nascent anger. Intriguing. What trust fund? Now, that was genuine astonishment. I watched her scan the documents, her hands trembling almost imperceptibly. $5 million, I continued, my voice a silken thread, earmarked for the Vance grandchildren Vivian has always craved. Apparently, my biological contributions weren't materializing swiftly enough. This can't be accurate. Chloe pushed the papers away as if they were contaminated. Julian assured me the marriage was purely a legal maneuver, a prerequisite for him to access his grandfather's primary inheritance. He said. I laughed, that brittle, glass shard sound again. What precisely did he say, Chloe? That he loved you? That I was frigid, emotionally unavailable, consumed by my career at the gallery. That's the narrative he spun for his mother regarding me only last month. She looked up sharply. How could you possibly know that? Because I've spent the past week meticulously uncovering the extent to which my husband, our husband, has been manipulating us both. The waiter approached. We both dismissed him with a curt wave, our gazes locked. There's more, I pressed on, retrieving my phone. Care to listen to the recording of Julian discussing leveraging Durand Holdings' real estate portfolio with Vivian? The very connections established by your family. My family's. Chloe's voice faded. Her mother, Genevieve Durand, helmed one of Montreal's most formidable real estate development firms, a detail Julian was intimately aware of long before he ever feigned interest in me. Did you ever pause to consider why he selected us? The question hung in the air, thick as the unspoken betrayals. Two inseparable friends who would never suspect the other? The ideal, impenetrable facade. Stop. Chloe stood so abruptly her chair scraped harshly against the floorboards. You're attempting to wound me because I wounded you. I comprehend. I deserve it. But sit down. My voice, though quiet, held an unexpected steel. You haven't heard the most compelling part. She sank back, more from the shock of my tone than any genuine compliance. Recall that summer internship Julian so generously arranged for you at Durand Holdings? The one that so thoroughly convinced your mother of his sterling character. I slid one final document across the table. Examine the date on that property transfer agreement. Her hands shook as she read. This is my mother's signature, but she would never liquidate her prime downtown commercial tower for a fraction of its market value. She wasn't aware she did. Verify the witness attestations. Chloe's face crumpled as she recognized her own meticulously formed signature. I was merely notarizing a stack of routine documents. Julian said it was excellent practice for my upcoming bar exam. While I was immersed in planning our wedding, you were unwittingly facilitating his theft from your own mother. The unvarnished truth tasted like ash on my tongue. He played us both, Chloe. The sole distinction is, I deciphered his game before he could expropriate everything. She looked up at me, truly looked, for the first time since she'd arrived. What are you going to do? I stood, gathering the incriminating papers. Wrong question. The pertinent question is, what are we going to do? We? You have two paths. Continue as his pawn and forfeit everything, or collaborate with me to dismantle him. I produced a final item, a sleek encrypted USB drive containing the entirety of my findings. Your mother's company, my personal assets, Vivian Vance's reputation. He constructed his entire empire on the flawed premise that we would never compare our narratives. Chloe stared at the drive as if it were a venomous serpent. If this information becomes public, everything will be incinerated. I placed my hand over hers, feeling the cold metal of the wedding band that mirrored my own. But this time, Chloe will be the ones holding the goddamn matches. Her fingers closed around the drive, and in her eyes, I saw a flicker of the friend I once knew, fierce, fiercely loyal, and utterly formidable when provoked. When do we begin? I smiled, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, it felt genuine. We already have. 3 empty bottles of Sancerre stood sentinel on the granite kitchen island, mocking me. Not my usual indulgence, but this evening was anything but usual. The documents procured from Julian's home office, his private, locked study, were spread across our antique cherrywood dining table, a wedding gift from Vivian, like the scattered pieces of a monstrous jigsaw puzzle I never wished to assemble. My phone illuminated. Another message from Julian. Isabel, please, can we discuss this with a modicum of rationality? Rational, like the systematic way he'd constructed this labyrinth of lies? Like the calculated precision with which he'd selected his targets? The phone buzzed again. Chloe, this time, Genevieve is asking pointed questions. We need to accelerate our timeline. I switched it off, but my hands refused to still. The sheer magnitude of what we were orchestrating finally crashed down on me. This wasn't merely about exposing Julian anymore. We were contemplating the systematic destruction of families, reputations, entire lives. The doorbell chimed. For a fleeting moment, I considered ignoring it, but then I heard the distinct click of a key in the lock. Only one person besides Julian possessed that key. Sacre bleu, Izzy. Marcus stepped into the dining room, his gaze sweeping over the chaotic tableau. When did you last see a bed? I gestured vaguely at the sea of papers. Were you aware Julian's father, Arthur Vance Sr., committed suicide? Marcus froze. Pardon? A decade ago, shortly after Julian graduated from McGill Law. I held up the yellowed newspaper clipping I'd unearthed from Vivian's meticulously archived financial records. Officially, it was a tragic hunting accident. Unofficially, I pushed forward a stack of offshore bank statements. He'd discovered Vivian and Julian had been systematically embezzling from his import-export conglomerate for years. Mon Dieu. Marcus sank into a dining chair. Does anyone else know this? Only the individual who's been furnishing me with anonymous intelligence. I tapped the burner phone resting on the table. They sent me this earlier today. Copies of Arthur Vance Sr.'s suicide note. He attempted to stop them, Marcus. He tried to expose them, and they... My voice fractured. Izzy. Marcus reached for my hand, but I pulled away. I'm becoming them. The words tasted like cinders. All these elaborate schemes for retribution, for justice. I'm morphing into the very thing I despise. No, you're not. Marcus's voice was firm. You're safeguarding people. Genevieve Duran's company, your future, Chloe's. Am I? I stood, pacing the length of the room. Or am I so fixated on obliterating Julian that I'm indifferent to the collateral damage? Because right now, I'm sitting here plotting to detonate this entire scandal at Vivian's charity gala, fully cognizant that it will devastate individuals who are entirely innocent. Such as Like Julian's cousin's children, who stand to lose their university tuition funds when I expose Vivian's labyrinthine financial malfeasance. Like Genevieve's loyal employees, who might face unemployment if Durand Holdings' reputation is irreparably tarnished. I snatched one of the empty wine bottles, oblivious to its hollowness. Like Arthur Vance Sr., who perished attempting to do the honorable thing while I'm concocting elaborate revenge fantasies like some deranged comic book antagonist. Marcus remained silent for a long moment. Then he rose and gently took the bottle from my hand. You want to know the difference between you and them? I looked away, but he persisted. You're standing here at 3 a.m, agonizing over the ethical ramifications of your actions. They're sleeping soundly, counting their ill-gotten gains and plotting their next con. That doesn't make it morally defensible. No, it doesn't. He began gathering the papers, organizing them with methodical precision. But it signifies you have a choice. You can unleash everything dramatically at the gala, as you intended, or what? Or we pursue this correctly. Legally. Meticulously. He held up Arthur Vance Sr.'s suicide note. We complete what Julian's father initiated. But we do it intelligently. We shield the innocent parties first. The burner phone buzzed. Another cryptic message from the anonymous source. Inquire about Vivian's Cayman Island accounts. I stared at the message, then at the disarray carpeting my dining room table. 8 years of marriage, a lifetime of friendship, generations of deceit, all culminating in this single, pivotal moment. All right, I said finally. Show me how to do this properly. Marcus nodded, retrieving his own phone. First, we need to consult someone specializing in complex financial fraud. I have a contact. Wait. I grasped his arm. Before we proceed, I need to understand something. Are you assisting me because I'm in the right, or simply because I'm your sister? He met my gaze steadily. Both. And neither. I'm assisting you because someone needs to put a stop to them. And you possess the fortitude to do it without becoming them. I looked at the empty wine bottles, the scattered documents, the tangible evidence of my near descent into their world of manipulation and vengeance. Perhaps he was right. Perhaps there was a more righteous way to burn it all to the ground. Marcus's lawyer friend, Dominic Russo, kept talking, his voice a low drone, but my attention was riveted to the single sheet of vellum before me, a list of names, predominantly children. Beneficiaries of trusts that would evaporate if we proceeded with our scorched earth strategy. The Cayman accounts are merely the tip of the iceberg, Dominic said, spreading more documents across his expansive mahogany desk. Vivian Vance's financial entanglements span at least 3 generations of both the Vance and, indirectly, the Durand families. How many individuals would be directly impacted? My voice sounded strangely detached, even to my own ears. Directly, I'd estimate around 35. Indirectly. He shrugged, a gesture of grim resignation. We're discussing the dismantlement of a scheme decades in the making. The ripple effects could touch hundreds. Marcus leaned forward, his expression intense. But the fraud itself is irrefutable. The question is the ethical deployment of that proof. Dominic tapped the list of names with a manicured finger. Some of these trusts are funding critical medical treatments, specialized education programs. Stop. I stood abruptly, moving to the panoramic window. Montreal sprawled below, a glittering, oblivious metropolis, unaware of the societal bomb we were poised to detonate. There must be an alternative. My phone vibrated. Chloe, Genevieve discovered the discrepancies in the property ledgers. She's confronting Vivian this afternoon. Our timeline just imploded, Marcus said, reading over my shoulder. If Genevieve confronts Vivian directly, the entire house of cards collapses chaotically anyway. I turned back to Dominic. How long would it take to legally insulate the innocent parties? Weeks, potentially months. We'd need to meticulously. The heavy office door burst open. Vivian Vance stood framed in the doorway, impeccably attired, as always, but her eyes held a feral glint. I should have anticipated you'd scurry to Marcus. How did you? Dominic began, flustered. My niece is an intern in your firm's litigation department, Dominic. Did Isabel include that detail in her sob story? How many families she's prepared to annihilate for her personal vendetta? That's remarkably rich coming from you. Marcus stood, interposing himself between us. Vivian ignored him, her gaze fixed on me. You believe you're a protector of the innocent? Arthur harbored similar delusions. Look where it led him. The room fell deathly silent. Even the ambient city hum seemed to recede. What did you just say? My hands gripped the back of the leather chair, knuckles stark white. Oh, didn't your clandestine informant provide you with a complete narrative? Vivian's smile was a razor's edge. Arthur didn't merely uncover our arrangements. He attempted to rectify them, to reroute assets to safeguard the beneficiaries, precisely as you're contemplating. And you silenced him. The pieces clicked into place with sickening precision. The hunting accident was exactly that, an unfortunate accident. But her eyes flickered away for a nanosecond. The salient point, Isabel, is that some intricate structures cannot be disassembled without obliterating everything they sustain. You're not merely battling Julian or myself. You're contending with generations of meticulously balanced, albeit unorthodox, financial architecture. Architecture founded on lies and grand larceny. Founded on perceived necessity. Vivian moved closer, her perfume, a bespoke Parisian blend, suddenly cloying. Did Julian ever confide in you why he married you? Your family's esteemed lineage. 3 generations of influential judges and crown prosecutors. The perfect impenetrable shield. My phone buzzed again. Genevieve Duran's name flashed on the screen. Answer the call, Vivian said softly. Listen to Genevieve as she uncovers what her own daughter has been concealing. Witness another family disintegrate. Or, she produced a thick vellum envelope. We can explore more. Civilized alternatives. Izzy, don't, Marcus interjected, his voice strained. What alternatives? My voice was steady, but my heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. A clean severance. A more than generous settlement. All innocent parties remain entirely protected. Vivian placed the envelope on Dominic's pristine desk. Everyone emerges a winner. Everyone except Justice, Marcus snapped. Justice? Vivian laughed, a low, dismissive sound. Ask Isabel what she truly desires, abstract justice or tangible peace? My phone continued its insistent buzzing. Chloe's urgent texts now joined Genevieve's unanswered calls. The list of names stared up at me from the desk. Children, families, futures hanging in the balance. How long do I have to decide? The words tasted of capitulation. Until Genevieve Durand finishes assimilating those property documents. Vivian glided to the door. Choose sagaciously, Isabel. Unlike Arthur, you still possess a choice. She departed, and the opulent office felt simultaneously vaster and more suffocating. You cannot be seriously entertaining this, Marcus said, his voice incredulous. I picked up the list of names, then my still vibrating phone. What if she's right? What if attempting to rectify this merely exacerbates the damage? That's fear speaking, Izzy, not your moral compass. Perhaps. I looked at Dominic. But what if fear is trying to convey something crucial? The phone buzzed one final time, then fell silent. Whatever Genevieve had discovered, it was too late to prevent the initial fallout. I picked up Vivian's envelope, feeling the weight of decisions not yet fully formed. I need to speak with Chloe, I said finally, before we determine anything further. Because sometimes I was slowly learning retribution wasn't about whom you were willing to harm, but whom you were determined to save. The Vance ancestral estate on Albizard loomed before me, its myriad windows glowing like malevolent beacons in the encroaching twilight. Luxury vehicles lined the sweeping circular driveway, all the key players assembled for what they believed was a surprise 30th anniversary celebration for Vivian and her second husband. Last opportunity to withdraw. Marcus stood beside me, his hand resting on the attaché case containing our arsenal. Every damning document, every incriminating recording, every meticulously gathered piece of evidence. They're all inside. Chloe materialized at my other shoulder, her voice taut with suppressed emotion. Genevieve is with them. Julian is monitoring the entrance like a Doberman. I smoothed the lines of my bespoke black Saint Laurent dress funereal chic, though they were not yet privy to that irony. Have you secured the perimeter? Dominic has operatives discreetly positioned at every egress. Marcus consulted his Patek Philippe. Once you initiate, no one departs until the full exposé. The weight of Vivian's envelope, tucked inside my clutch, pressed against my ribs her offer of silence, of protection for the innocent, still unsealed, still a seductive possibility. We entered through the vast, commercial-grade kitchen, where caterers bustled, oblivious they were preparing the Last Supper of the Vance dynasty. Julian spotted me instantly, his expression flickering between a fleeting relief and dawning suspicion. Isabel. He moved towards me, a flute of Bollinger in hand. I hadn't expected you. And Miss Vivian's milestone celebration? My smile felt like it was composed of finely ground glass. Wouldn't dream of it. His eyes darted to the attaché case, to Chloe, to Marcus. I saw the precise moment he registered that something was profoundly amiss, but Vivian's voice, amplified slightly, cut through the polite murmur of conversation. Everyone, if I could have your attention in the grand salon, please. The throng shifted, carrying us along in its current. I caught glimpses of familiar faces. Genevieve, pale but unervingly composed. Vivian's second husband, blissfully unaware and beaming. Julian's sister, clutching her children's hands. The children, dear God, the children. Vivian raised her champagne flute. Thank you all for joining us to actually, I stepped forward, my voice surprisingly resonant, carrying across the suddenly stilled room. I believe I'd like to offer a few words first. Julian started towards me, but Marcus smoothly intercepted his path. Chloe positioned herself unobtrusively near Genevieve. Isabel, Vivian warned, her tone low and menacing, consider your actions with extreme care. I withdrew the vellum envelope she had given me, still sealed. I have considered them. For weeks, I've pondered little else. I turned to address the assembled guests. About justice and clemency. About who merits the unvarnished truth and who warrants mercy. Izzy, Julian's voice held a genuine tremor of fear now. Whatever you believe you've uncovered, I've uncovered everything. I opened the attaché case, but I didn't remove the documents, not yet. About Arthur Sr.'s accident. About the labyrinthine trust funds. About your concurrent marriages and Vivian's elaborate financial machinations and every single falsehood you've spun to keep this precarious house of cards from collapsing. The salon erupted in a cacophony of shocked whispers. Genevieve stepped forward, her face ashen. Chloe. I'm so sorry, my man. Chloe's voice broke. I didn't know. Not until Isabel showed me. Showed you what? Julian's sister demanded, her voice sharp with alarm. What is transpiring here? I looked at the children, their bewildered faces, their innocent futures teetering on the precipice of my next words. Vivian's envelope felt like a brand against my skin. The truth, I said softly, is that I arrived here tonight intending to systematically destroy everything. To expose decades of fraud, manipulation, and profound deceit. To secure justice for every individual who has been victimized by the Vance family's legacy of lies. I pulled out the first document, Arthur Vance Sr.'s actual suicide note. Vivian went utterly still, but standing here observing all of you. I met Julian's anguished gaze. I realized there's something more corrosive than being deceived, something more damaging than betrayal. Isabel, Marcus cautioned, his voice a low rumble, but I pressed on. It's becoming the very entity you're fighting against. I struck a match when had I retrieved it from my clutch, and touched the flame to Vivian's envelope. The thick paper caught instantly, and I dropped it into the open attaché case. No! Marcus lunged forward, but it was too late. The evidence blazed, years of painstaking investigation turning to ash. With it, ostensibly, burned my chance at justice, at revenge, at everything I thought I craved. The fire alarm shrieked, a piercing electronic wail. Sprinklers activated, unleashing an icy deluge. People scrambled for the exits, pushing past Dominic's bewildered operatives in the ensuing chaos. Through the swirling smoke and drenching spray, I met Vivian's eyes. She knew what I'd done, chosen mercy over retribution, chosen to shield the innocent over punishing the guilty. But her nascent triumphant smirk faltered as I calmly withdrew my phone and pressed send on a pre-drafted email. Because sometimes, the most profound revenge isn't obliteration. It's meticulously orchestrated redemption. The flashing lights of Charite du Quebec cruisers painted Vivian's pristine, now water-damaged kitchen in strobing crimson and sapphire. She sat across from me at the vast marble island, both of us sodden from the sprinklers, watching uniformed officers methodically cart away boxes of financial records, the authentic evidence, not the decoy files I'd theatrically incinerated. Duplicates, I stated quietly. Everything in that attaché case? Mere photocopies. The originals, along with detailed forensic accounting reports, were dispatched to the Financial Crimes Unit an hour ago. Her perfectly manicured nails, now chipped, tapped a nervous rhythm against her Limoges coffee cup. You orchestrated this moment with deliberate precision. The gala. The entire family assembled. Like father, like daughter-in-law, perhaps. I slid Arthur Vance Sr.'s genuine, unburned suicide note across the gleaming counter. He planned to expose everything at your 20th anniversary party, didn't he? Before the convenient hunting accident. The drumming ceased. Through the rain-streaked window, I saw Julian being led towards a police cruiser, Marcus observing with grim, quiet satisfaction. You don't comprehend the magnitude of what you've unleashed. Vivian's voice trembled, a stark contrast to her usual iron composure. Those trust funds are being safeguarded. I produced my phone, displaying the emergency court orders Dominic had secured. Every innocent beneficiary has been legally firewalled from the fraudulent accounts. The children will retain their educational endowments. The critical medical care will continue uninterrupted. For the first time, I witnessed genuine, unadulterated fear in her eyes. How? I had 3 weeks after your magnanimous offer of that envelope, Vivian. 3 weeks during which you presumed you had already triumphed. I leaned forward, my voice a low, confiding murmur. Did you truly imagine I spent that interlude idly twiddling my thumbs? A commotion at the kitchen entrance drew our attention. Genevieve Durand entered, flanked by 2 plainclothes federal investigators. Her gaze, cold and resolute, locked with Vivian's. You murdered him, Genevieve stated, her voice flat, devoid of inflection. You murdered Arthur when he attempted to shield my daughter from your predatory schemes. Vivian shot to her feet so abruptly her chair clattered to the Italian tile floor. That's preposterous. Arthur was on the verge of exposing how you manipulated Chloe to gain illicit access to Durand Holdings' proprietary data, I interjected smoothly. How you coerced Julian into marrying us both, 2 women from influential families, to maintain your precarious financial charade and social standing. Everything I undertook was for the preservation of this family. No. Chloe appeared in the doorway, her face tear-streaked, but her stance unwavering. Everything you did, Vivian, was for yourself. And now we all finally understand why. I slid one final document across the island, a faded, slightly creased photograph from decades past. Vivian went preternaturally still. Arthur wasn't merely attempting to expose the financial fraud, was he? I watched her carefully constructed facade crumble. He discovered something far more damaging. About Julian's true paternity. About why you so desperately needed the Moreau family's connections, their untarnished reputation. Maman? Julian's anguished cry carried from outside. Maman, what's happening? Vivian lunged for the photograph, but Genevieve, surprisingly agile, intercepted it. Her sharp intake of breath echoed in the suddenly silent, cavernous kitchen. That's my father. With Vivian. 38 years ago, to be precise, I confirmed. 9 months before Julian was born. The unutterable truth hung between them, thick and suffocating as the lingering smoke. Decades of intricate manipulation, all to conceal one desperate, youthful indiscretion, all to maintain the flawless veneer of the Vance dynasty. Julian was Genevieve's half-brother. "You've destroyed everything," Vivian whispered, her voice raspy, just as Arthur attempted to. "No." I stood, gathering the few remaining relevant papers. "You destroyed everything the moment you prioritized deceit over love, avarice over integrity. Arthur tried to save us, all of us. And now, at long last, he has." "What do you mean?" I produced my phone one last time, displaying the message chain from the anonymous sender, a series of meticulously scheduled emails, programmed by a dead man to be delivered years after his demise. "Arthur knew he might not survive his attempt to expose the truth, Vivian. So he left a trail of digital breadcrumbs for anyone courageous enough, or perhaps desperate enough, to follow them." I met her vacant gaze. "I wasn't your first victim, Vivian, but I am unequivocally your last." The officers approached to escort her away. Through the window, I saw Julian watching, a dawning, horrified comprehension contorting his features as Genevieve showed him the photograph. "Was it worth it?" Vivian asked, her voice barely audible as they led her from the room. "Incinerating everything merely to vindicate a dead man's honor?" I thought of the children upstairs, their futures now secure, of Chloe and Genevieve, finally liberated from decades of insidious manipulation, of Arthur Vance Sr., who perished attempting to protect them all. "Some things," I said quietly, "are profoundly worth burning for." The weak dawn light began to filter over the ravaged Vance estate, painting the chaos in hues of gray and faint rose. In the distance, sirens faded into the urban hum. Beside me, Marcus gently squeezed my shoulder. "Are you all right, Izzy?" I watched Vivian disappear into the back of a police cruiser, 38 years of secrets finally crumbling in her wake. "No," I answered with unvarnished honesty. "But I will be. Because sometimes the truth doesn't set you free. Sometimes it just starkly illuminates who you truly are." The last of Julian's meticulously organized archive boxes sat unopened on my reclaimed elm kitchen counter. Through the expansive window, vibrant autumn leaves, crimson, gold, and russet danced across my Westmount backyard, the very lawn where 3 ambitious teenagers had once, under a summer sky, sworn eternal fealty. My phone buzzed. "Chloe, Genevieve wants to meet." Both of us. Her office. The trials had concluded the previous day. Vivian and Julian, both found guilty on multiple counts. The financial press had labeled it a landmark case of corporate malfeasance. The society columns had decried it as a devastating scandal. Neither quite captured the nuanced, messy truth. I lifted the lid from the box, half expecting more ledgers, more hidden codicils, more secrets. Instead, I found an old Sony Hi8 video camera, the kind we'd all used that pivotal summer before McGill, when the future felt limitless and gilded with possibility. The doorbell chimed. Chloe stood on the threshold, looking smaller, more vulnerable, somehow more akin to the girl I used to share dreams with than the woman who had helped me unravel an empire. "I found mine too," she said, holding up an identical camera. Tucked away in Maman's attic. We placed them side by side on the counter, these tangible relics of who we once were, or perhaps who we thought we were. Neither of us made a move to power them on. "Did you read Julian's victim impact statement?" she asked, her voice subdued. "No." I poured us both strong, black coffee from the Chemex, a ritual resurrected from a simpler, less fractured time. "Did you?" He claimed he loved us both. Her laugh was a brittle, fragile thing. "Actually believed it, I suspect." "That's Julian," I said, sliding her mug across the polished concrete. Always inhabiting his own curated reality, even when it was an elaborate fabrication. The pale afternoon light caught the lenses of the cameras, casting twin, elongated shadows. Chloe reached out, her fingers brushing one gently. We should watch them, she suggested. Before we see Genevieve. Before? Before we decide what comes next. She nodded. We both understood that Genevieve's summons wasn't merely about reconciliation or familial ties. It was about the future of Durand Holdings, about rebuilding trust, about second chances, about whether some bridges, once incinerated, could ever truly be reconstructed. I connected the first camera to my laptop. The screen flickered, then resolved into a vibrant, sun-drenched scene. There we were, young, effervescent, whole. Julian, behind the lens, narrating our final, idyllic summer together before university, before ambition and betrayal became inextricably intertwined, before we learned how love and lies could wear the same deceptive face. Stop, Chloe said suddenly, her voice sharp. Freeze that frame. The image halted on our younger selves sharing some forgotten, hilarious secret, but it was Julian's faint reflection in a nearby window that snared my attention the calculating way he observed us both, even then. Planning. Scheming. He didn't destroy us, I realized with a sudden, piercing clarity. He merely revealed who we already were, deep down. What do you mean, Izzy? You always craved adventure, the thrill of the unknown. I always needed control, order. He simply identified those core truths and weaponized them against us. Chloe's coffee grew cold, untouched. And now the second camera sat on the counter, its secrets still dormant, unwatched. Some truths I was beginning to comprehend didn't need to be visually confirmed to be deeply understood. Now we choose, I said, my voice quiet but firm. Not between right and wrong, not anymore. We choose between what is easy and what is true. The doorbell chimed again. Genevieve. Before Chloe moved to answer, she grasped my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. I am sorry, Isabel, she whispered, her eyes meeting mine. Not for loving him, but for forgetting how to love you first. I squeezed back, a silent acknowledgement, remembering Vivian's final, bitter words at her sentencing. Love makes liars of us all. Perhaps, I told Chloe, we cease trying to mend the past. Perhaps we simply dedicate ourselves to building something new, something authentic. She nodded, a flicker of understanding in her gaze. She knew what I wasn't explicitly stating about the future of Genevieve's company, about the possibility of genuine second chances, about how sometimes the most potent form of revenge isn't about destroying what was, but about courageously creating what could be. I opened the door to Genevieve Durand, noting the subtle but profound shift in her carriage, straighter, more resolute, liberated from decades of insidious manipulation. The crisp autumn wind scattered another flurry of leaves across the manicured lawn. Somewhere, in a federal penitentiary, Vivian Vance was likely already plotting her appeals. In another, Julian was composing letters we would never read. Life, in its messy, imperfect way, moved inexorably forward. I left the cameras on the counter, untouched. Some memories didn't require revisiting. Some truths were better lived than merely remembered. Genevieve spread a fresh set of architectural blueprints across my kitchen table, plans for innovative, sustainable urban development, for moving forward with integrity. Chloe and I exchanged a quick, knowing glance, remembering other papers, other plans, other far more perilous choices. Ready? Genevieve asked, her gaze encompassing us both. I thought of Arthur Vance Sr., meticulously setting his posthumous truth bombs to detonate years after his death, of Vivian, erecting fortress-like walls to protect secrets that were never worth the price of their keeping, of Julian, loving so desperately and selfishly he forgot how to love with any semblance of honesty. Yes, I said, and for the first time in a very long time, I truly meant it. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about getting free.